So thank you again, Rachel, for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, no problem. I'm excited to talk about sports and sports journalism.
Of course. So just to start things off, would you provide just a brief summary of your current role and your main responsibilities?
Yeah, so I manage our Olympic research team at NBC Sports. So we're the group of people on the editorial side of Olympics production. So we typically spend part of the year in a normal time on the road talking to athletes and getting their backstories and kind of learning the ins and outs of every Olympic sport. And then we use all of that information for NBC's Olympic broadcasts to kind of add those athlete stories and bring them to a TV audience.
That's really cool. How did you guys have to adjust, especially when with last year, the Japan Olympics was supposed to be last year, and now it would happen just about a couple months ago.
Yeah,
How,
it was a huge adjustment. I felt like we're probably 60% of the way there in our preparations in March 2020 and just, had to hit the pause button and reset. And I think at first it was disappointing because it felt like we had worked so hard already. And then it was kind of keeping the big picture in mind and also hearing from the athletes and how much it affected them and how devastating it was for some of them of just they had put 4 years of training and preparation and devotion into this and learning they had to train for an extra year. So it was definitely an adjustment from that standpoint and learning that some storylines change, and how do we adapt to that? How do we adapt our coverage to reflect the times and make sure we're being sensitive about the situation going on in the world? And I think just also adjusting our so much of our job is talking to athletes in person and having that in-person access that I think is increasingly rare. And that part was just stripped away. So we really had to be thoughtful and strategic about how to continue to connect with athletes and coaches and to still get those stories told. So it was a lot of Zoom interviews. It was a lot of phone interviews. And I think in some ways it was good because I think everybody was in the same boat. Everybody was staying at home for so long. So athletes had a little bit of spare time and they weren't competing. And so they had a little more time to reflect and talk about things. And so I think in some ways, the access was maybe more widespread than usual.
Mhm. Absolutely. That sounds like a lot, especially within the last year, but it looked like, at least from a consumer's end, you guys did a fantastic job given all the circumstances. So that kind of brings into my next question. I'm pretty sure that's one key lesson learned, just how to handle the sports industry during a global pandemic. What are some other lessons that you've learned throughout your career from working in sports?
Yeah, I would say raise your hand and ask questions. Ask questions of people who are more experienced and have the experience in industries that you're interested in, and also volunteer for projects that sound like of interest to you because you'll get to learn about new aspects of the industry and kind of figure out the things that you're passionate about. I would say own up to your mistakes, but don't beat yourself up about it. I think back to my first year or two at NBC, and if I made a small inconsequential mistake, it would ruin my day. And I think each of us is going to make mistakes, and be quick to own up to it and admit that it was your fault and communicate the mistake to who it needs to be communicated to, and then move on. And don't let it ruin your day. I like to write them down in my daily planner and what I learned from it so that I don't make the same mistake. But you got to move on and not beat yourself up about it. And then I think the other thing is just don't forget the joy. At the end of the day, we are making sports TV and telling stories of athletes that will hopefully inspire other people and bring them joy. So even on the days that are less than great, we're still doing something that's really unique and special. And so not losing sight of that, I think is really important too.
Absolutely. Those are great lessons. And I can relate to one of them because I'm still, unfortunately, currently, I'm getting better at it, but I still have those moments where I just kind of beat myself up a little bit, making mistakes. But then I realize we're human, it happens, and just move forward and improve. So that's a good reminder.
Definitely.
So another question kind of transitions into highlights of your career, of course, covering the Olympics and working with NBC. What are some one or two, or even let's give a bonus, one or three highlights throughout from your sports career?
Highlights. So I would say, getting to cover three Olympics so far and working on the primetime shows in Pyeongchang and Tokyo, and getting to work with Mike Tirico, who is so smart and, so receptive to ideas and does all of his homework and really brings so much talent and, and joy to his job. Getting to work with people like that, and also getting to feel like we have a voice in telling some of these stories and pitching ideas for the shows and getting to see some of that come to life, is really exciting. And I think another highlight is writing my first show. I did that for the Paralympics for Pyeongchang and the Paralympics, which are going on right now, for Tokyo through September 5th. Just so many stories of grit and hard work and these athletes who have just put in everything to get to the biggest stage in their sports. I think it's the whole event is so rewarding to work on. And I remember I was in an Uber going to work like an overnight shift, and my driver asked, what do you do for work? And I said, I'm a writer, and that made me so happy. So it was just such a good experience to work on those games. And I think probably the third highlight was just becoming a manager and getting to work with the team and develop a plan for a big project and kind of manage the points of that project and make sure we were staying on track into the Tokyo Olympics. That was really rewarding too.
You kind of brought up the managerial parts of being a manager. What would you say are the main differences between being a writer or I guess in other fields, entry level, and then how does it differ, not just your job, but just I guess your personal life, your professional work life once you hit the managerial level?
Yeah, I think so much of the transition is just when you're an individual contributor and, and of course I'm still that too, but everything depends, you're evaluated on your own performance. And then when you become a manager, it's all of a sudden your team's performance that, that's being evaluated. So it's figuring out, how to make that transition, how to get your own individual projects done and figuring out what's important to you and important to your team and what kind of leader you want to be. So I'm learning a lot every day because I'm still new to it, but it's something that I wanted to do and something I want to keep getting better at.
Absolutely. And this ties into the last part, another question. What are some generic advice? So it's kind of a two-parter. Advice for college students or even recent grads who are pursuing a career in sports. And then the second, I guess, part-ish is specifically in sports media.
Yeah, I would say probably the first one is ask for the informational interview. I'm a big proponent of that. And, don't be shy in reaching out to people and asking for their advice in jobs that seem interesting to you and doing it early before you're really in crunch time of like really needing to find a job. That's how I got my first job at NBC Sports. So I think there's so much benefit and so many people are happy to do it that I think the informational interview is a big asset. I would say secondly, seeking out as many opportunities as you can and taking advantage of the resources you have as a student. So, your student newspaper or your student TV station or radio station, or, if you want to work in sports management, working for a team on campus, or, on a marketing project or PR, there's so many opportunities that you have as a student. So tapping into that and the internships that are local to your city and shadowing opportunities. So really just putting yourself out there in any way that you can and getting that experience on your resume is so crucial as a student when you start looking for jobs. And then I would say the third thing is just like, don't give up. If you really want to work in sports, keep networking, keep building your resume and your portfolio and doing the work you love. I think our industry functions in a way that it's unlikely to have a job 6 months in advance. And that's something that like I had to wrap my head around. And I think so many people do. And I think kind of embracing that uncertainty, if this is something you really want to do, and then just, trusting your gut and sticking with it.
That's definitely great advice. And I heard a lot of it from grad school, and they're always telling me the emphasizing informational interviews, like such as these, because they're so crucial. And honestly, for at least for me, the more I keep doing them, they actually get they get more fun along the way.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way to, expose yourself to jobs that you didn't even know existed. Like I didn't know Olympic researcher was a job
Mhm.
until I did an informational interview. And I think in certain ways you can figure out what might be a potential job for you. And then maybe you find other jobs that you're like, I would never want to do that. And that's also useful information. So I think it kind of goes both ways as you start to narrow in on what it is that you're really passionate about.
Absolutely. And this ties into another one, leading to another one. Some second to last one is, what would you tell if you could go back in time, maybe there's a time travel machine somewhere in the world that'll be built. Once that's built, what if you can go back in time till then, what would you tell your younger self, let's say college self or even recent grad?
I would say, that's a good question. I would say keep working hard. There are so many talented people in this industry and so many hard workers, and a work ethic does so much for your career and exposes you to so many new opportunities. So keep working hard and don't sweat the small stuff. And I think that goes back to your question about, advice and kind of things you learn from working in sports is just, don't be so hard on yourself and learn from your mistakes and certainly acknowledge them, but you know, be okay with the fact that you're going to make mistakes and learn from them and ask for help, and voice when you need help and can learn something.
That's definitely a good point as well. And then final question. I know I talked about memories or highlights in your career. Similar point, best funnest project that you've worked on in your career. If you have to pick.
Oh
If you have to pick.
man, oh that's a tough one. Funnest project I've worked on. My gosh. Um, Man, I think, man, there's so many. I mean, I think the whole Olympic process and what we get to do in interviewing athletes, and there's so many ways the information is used. So whether it's getting to see a segment that you write, appear on TV, or whether you're writing for the website and you interview an athlete who I got to talk to, Wyoming Tyus, who was the first woman to go back to back in the 100 meters, and I didn't know her story very much, and I started reading about her and I thought, why haven't people written more about her? She's so fascinating. And she was the first person to do this. And so I got to interview her and she was tremendous. She's just a legend. And I think, getting to tell those kinds of stories and bring them to life and learn about these interesting people who inspire us, every day is, it's a long-winded answer of saying that the whole project of working on the Olympics is something that's been really fantastic.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that actually concludes this part. And thank you so much again, Rachel, for joining and taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know the Paralympics are happening right now to do
Yeah,
this.
of course. No, it was so nice to talk to you.